You know what they say about good intentions paving the road to hell? Well, apparently that applies to alien highways too, because the crew of the Velaxian research vessel Pristine Endeavor was about to learn that sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Captain Krill stood on his bridge, all 7 feet of pale blue perfection, obsessively adjusting his already immaculate uniform for the 15th time in 10 minutes. Everything about Krill screamed control freak, from his precisely trimmed cranial ridges to the way he sanitized his hands every 37 seconds. The man had turned anal retentiveness into an art form. "Science Officer Vex," he announced in that clipped, emotionless tone that made robots sound warm and fuzzy, status report on the Earth sterilization survey. Quinn Vex, who looked like someone had taken a filing cabinet and given it legs, consulted her tablet with the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax code. All bacterial samples eliminated as per Protocol 779. Surface decontamination complete. No organic matter detected aboard vessel. That's when the universe decided to have a laugh. A wet, slobbering, absolutely disgusting laugh. The thing that came limping out of Storage Bay 3 wasn't just ugly, it was an affront to everything the Velaxians held sacred. Picture this, a mangy, 3-legged creature covered in matted fur that looked like it had been used to clean engine filters. One eye was clouded over, it was missing half an ear, and it smelled like a garbage disposal had a baby with a sewage plant. "Contamination alert!" shrieked the ship's computer, nearly giving Captain Krill a heart attack. "Unidentified biological entity detected." The crew scattered like roaches when someone turns on the lights. Ensign Nix actually fainted, which would have been more impressive if he hadn't been standing next to a wall to catch him. The creature, let's call him Rusty, because that's what the faded tag around his neck said, wagged his tail with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just won the lottery. He had no idea he was currently the most hated being in this sector of space. What is that?" Krill whispered, backing away like Rusty was radioactive. "According to my scans," Vex replied, her voice shaking, "it appears to be a canine species from Earth, commonly referred to as a dog." "A dog?" Krill's voice cracked. "Those filthy, chaotic, emotion-driven creatures the humans worship?" Rusty chose that moment to shake himself, sending a cloud of fur and God knows what else floating through the previously pristine air. The ship's air filtration system immediately went into overdrive, making sounds like it was having an asthma attack. "Sir," Vex said, consulting her protocols with the desperation of someone looking for a life raft, "Regulation 442 clearly states that all contaminated materials must be disposed of immediately." "Disposed of?" Krill's eye twitched. "We can't just murder it." "Not murder, sir. Relocation. To the nearest waste disposal facility." And that, folks, is how the most heartless species in the galaxy decided to dump a 3-legged dog at the first space station they could find. Because apparently, when you've spent so long avoiding feelings that you've forgotten how to have them, abandoning a defenseless animal seems like a perfectly reasonable solution. Rusty, blissfully unaware that he was about to become galactic trash, continued wagging his tail as the ship changed course for Waypoint Charlie. Some days the universe really does have a sick sense of humor. Now, if you've ever met a human, you know they have this annoying habit of caring about things. It's like they can't help themselves show them something hurt, abandoned, or generally pathetic, and their first instinct is to fix it. It's both their greatest strength and their most dangerous weakness. Jake Torres was a walking advertisement for this particular human flaw. The maintenance chief of Waypoint Charlie looked like someone had taken a bulldozer and taught it to curse in 6 languages. Broad-shouldered, permanently grease-stained, and sporting a beard that could hide small spacecraft, Jake was the kind of guy who'd punch a black hole if it looked at him wrong. "Pip," he growled into his comm, "you see the garbage these blue freaks just dumped at Airlock 7? His assistant, Pip Kowalski, bounded over with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated squirrel. Where Jake was all rough edges and suppressed violence, Pip was sunshine and optimism wrapped in coveralls 2 sizes too big. She had this habit of talking to machinery like it was people, which would be concerning if the machines didn't seem to actually respond better to her than anyone else. "Oh my God, Jake, it's a dog," Pip squealed, already kneeling next to the transport container. Look at this poor baby. Jake's expression shifted from annoyed to murderous as he got a good look at Rusty. The dog was in bad shape, worse than bad. Someone had clearly tried to decontaminate him with chemicals that had burned patches of fur off his hide. He was shaking, dehydrated, and looked like he'd given up on life. Those heartless sons of Jake's creative cursing was interrupted by Rusty lifting his head and looking at him with the most grateful expression a dog has ever managed. And that was it. Game over. Jake Torres, terror of maintenance crews across 3 sectors, was officially wrapped around a 3-legged mutt's remaining paw. "Get me everything," he barked at Pip. "Food, water, medical supplies, and find me the comm frequency for that Velaxian ship." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to have a very polite conversation about proper waste disposal procedures." The conversation was about as polite as a supernova. "You did what?" Jake's voice echoed through the station's corridors. "You dumped a living creature like garbage?" Captain Krill's hologram flickered with what might have been discomfort if he'd been capable of such an emotion. The contamination required immediate disposal. It was the logical course of action. Logical? Jake's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "You abandoned a herd animal because it was inconvenient?" "Animals are inefficient biological constructs that serve no functional purpose," Krill replied with the emotional depth of a calculator. "The creature was disrupting ship operations." That's when Jake realized he wasn't dealing with evil, he was dealing with something worse. He was dealing with beings who had systematically removed everything that made life worth living from their existence. "Pip," he said quietly after ending the call, "how's our new friend doing?" "Better. But Jake," Pip's usual cheer faded. "Whatever they did to him, he's not going to make it without proper medical care. And we don't have the facilities for this kind of treatment." Jake looked down at Rusty, who was trying to eat with damaged paws, still wagging his tail despite everything. The dog trusted them completely, without question, even after being abandoned by the last aliens he'd met. "Then we're going to get him to someone who does." "The Velaxians?" "The Velaxians." Pip's eyes widened. "Jake, they'll just dump him again." Jake's grin was the kind that made smart people nervous and stupid people reconsider their life choices. "Not if they don't know we're coming. Here's something you should know about humans. When they decide to do something monumentally stupid in the name of helping someone they care about, they don't just fail, they fail spectacularly, accidentally succeed, and somehow make everything worse and better at the same time." Jake's plan was simple, which should have been the first warning sign. "We're going to sneak aboard their ship," he explained to Pip as they suited up, "return Rusty to them, and make sure they understand proper pet care before we leave." "That's not a plan, Jake. That's a wish list. Do you have a better idea?" Pip considered this. "Not really. But when this goes wrong, I'm blaming you in my last words." Getting aboard the Pristine Endeavor was easier than it should have been, mainly because Velaxians apparently believed that posting a no trespassing sign was sufficient security. Jake used his maintenance credentials to request a routine docking inspection, and Captain Krill, who was apparently as gullible as he was emotionally stunted, granted permission. Rusty, now cleaned up and wearing a makeshift spacesuit that Pip had cobbled together, seemed to think this was the best adventure ever. His tail hadn't stopped wagging since they'd left the station. The moment they stepped aboard the Velaxian ship, Jake understood why they'd found Rusty so disturbing. The place was like a hospital crossed with a museum, everything white, sterile, and completely devoid of personality. It smelled like disinfectant and sadness. "This is depressing," Pip whispered. "This is why they don't understand," Jake replied. "They've never experienced chaos." That's when Rusty decided to provide some education. The moment his paws hit the deck, the dog took off like a furry missile. His leash, which Jake had thought was secure, turned out to be more of a suggestion. Within 30 seconds, Rusty had managed to knock over a potted plant, apparently the only one on the ship, sending soil everywhere. Get his head stuck in a ventilation grate, requiring the grate to be removed. Discover that Velaxian computer cables made excellent chew toys. Leave muddy paw prints on every pristine white surface within a 50-foot radius. The ship's computer was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Contamination detected. Initiating emergency protocols. Contamination levels rising. Please advise. Contamination alert. Biological hazard. Does not compute. Alarms started blaring. Lights started flashing. And Jake realized they might have overestimated the Velaxians' ability to handle even minor disruptions to their perfectly ordered world. "Jake," Pip said, watching an alien crew member hyperventilate into a sanitizer dispenser, "I think we broke them." Captain Krill appeared around the corner, took one look at Rusty enthusiastically destroying his ship's aesthetic, and did something Jake had never seen an alien do before. He fainted. "Try." "Okay," Jake said, stepping over the unconscious captain. "Maybe we should have thought this through a little more." Rusty, completely oblivious to the chaos he was causing, had found Quinn Vex and was trying to make friends by jumping up on her pristine uniform. Vex stood frozen like a deer in headlights, apparently uncertain whether touching the dog would contaminate her or if running away would be undignified. It's trying to communicate," she whispered. "He's trying to say hello," Jake explained. "Dogs are social creatures. They show affection through physical contact." "Affection?" Vex's expression suggested Jake had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. What functional purpose does affection serve? And that's when Jake realized the scope of the problem they were dealing with. You know that moment in disaster movies when someone says, "Well, at least it can't get any worse," and then immediately everything gets worse? Jake was having that moment, except instead of asteroids or alien invasions, he was dealing with a three-legged dog who had apparently decided that a sterile alien spaceship was the perfect place to throw a party. Captain Krill had regained consciousness and was now having what could only be described as the galaxy's most dignified panic attack. He was hyperventilating while simultaneously trying to sanitize everything within reach, which was creating a feedback loop of anxiety that was frankly painful to watch. "This is a disaster," he kept repeating. "A complete systematic failure. The contamination levels are beyond acceptable parameters." "His name is Rusty," Jake said firmly. "And he's not contamination. He's a living being." "Living beings are inefficient," Krill snapped, his usual composure cracking like a dam. "They require maintenance, they create waste, they serve no logical function." That's when Pip, who had been trying to calm down the ship's computer by talking to it like a traumatized child, accidentally triggered the emergency lockdown protocol. Blast doors started slamming shut, lights switched to emergency red, and the ship's AI began announcing in increasingly panicked tones that they were all going to die from biological contamination. "Pip," Jake shouted over the alarms. "I was trying to help," she shouted back. "The computer was having an anxiety attack." "Computers don't have anxiety attacks?" "This one does. It keeps asking me if it's going to catch something from the dog." Meanwhile, Rusty had discovered the ship's central corridor and was having the time of his life running back and forth, his claws clicking on the pristine floor, leaving a trail of fur and joy in his wake. The remaining crew members were pressed against the walls like he was a natural disaster. That's when the real disaster struck. A power coupling in the wall started sparking, probably from all the system overloads, and sent a shower of electrical energy toward Quinn Vex. She stood there, frozen by the sight of approaching electrocution, apparently unable to process the concept of self-preservation. Rusty moved faster than anyone expected a three-legged dog could move. He slammed into Vex's legs, knocking her clear of the electrical discharge and taking the hit himself. The dog went down hard, whimpering but alive. The ship went silent except for the emergency alarms. Vex stared down at Rusty, who was trying to get back up despite being obviously hurt. For the first time since Jake had met her, the Velaxian showed something resembling emotion. "Why?" she whispered. "Because that's what dogs do," Jake said quietly, kneeling next to Rusty. "They protect the people they care about, even if those people have never shown them kindness." "But I am not his pack leader." I am not even his species. There is no logical reason for such behavior. Logic's got nothing to do with it, Jake replied, gently checking Rusty for injuries. He saved you because he's a good dog. That's what good dogs do. Captain Krill, who had been watching this exchange, slowly approached. The creature Rusty he deliberately placed himself in danger to protect Officer Vex. Yeah. Mela. Without expectation of reward or recognition? That's right. Met. Krill was quiet for a long moment, staring at the dog who was now trying to lick Vex's hand, despite his injuries. This behavior pattern suggests emotional attachment, loyalty. Concepts our species considers inefficient. Maybe, Jake said, you've been measuring efficiency wrong. That's when Quinn Vex did something that probably violated every regulation in the Velaxian handbook. She gently petted Rusty's head. Thank you, she whispered. And for the first time in his life, a Velaxian felt gratitude. The aftermath of Rusty's heroic moment was like watching a civilization discover fire, except instead of fire, they were discovering feelings, and instead of being excited about it, they were absolutely terrified. Captain Krill spent the first hour after the incident sanitizing his hands and muttering calculations under his breath, trying to quantify the exact efficiency loss caused by emotional contamination. Meanwhile, Quinn Vex sat next to Rusty's improvised bed, apparently fascinated by the concept of keeping watch over someone who couldn't benefit her in any measurable way. This is highly irregular, she kept saying, but she didn't stop petting him. Jake and Pip had been officially designated temporary biological consultants, which was Velaxian speak for we have no idea what we're doing, but we're too proud to admit it. They were given quarters that looked like luxury prison cells and unlimited access to the ship's medical bay, where they were working on getting Rusty back to full health. Jake, Pip said, running a diagnostic scanner over the dog. I think we accidentally started a revolution. She wasn't wrong. Word of Rusty's heroic act had spread through the ship's crew like a virus, an appropriate metaphor, considering how the Velaxians viewed it. Small groups of aliens kept finding excuses to walk past the medical bay, stealing glances at the dog like he was some kind of mythical creature. Ensign Nix, the same guy who'd fainted at first sight of Rusty, had actually asked if he could bring the dog some food. When Jake explained that dogs enjoyed treats, Nick spent 3 hours researching optimal nutrition delivery systems for canine morale enhancement. The results were scientifically perfect and completely lacking in soul, basically, if dog treats were designed by robots for robots. Rusty ate them anyway, because dogs are diplomatic like that. Captain Krill was having the hardest time adjusting. Every few hours he'd appear in the medical bay, ostensibly to check on the contamination status, but really to stare at Rusty with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that hurt his brain. Officer Torres, he said during one of these visits, I have been reviewing the literature on human-animal relationships. Find anything interesting? The concept of pets appears to serve no logical function. They consume resources, require maintenance, and provide no measurable return on investment. Yet humans consistently rank pet ownership as a significant contributor to life satisfaction. Jake scratched Rusty behind the ears, earning a tail wag that somehow made the sterile room feel warmer. Not everything valuable can be measured, Captain. But how do you quantify the benefit of companionship? You don't. You just feel it. Krill's expression suggested Jake had just told him to breathe underwater. The real breakthrough came 3 days later, when Rusty was finally well enough to walk around the ship. The crew had prepared for this like they were handling plutonium protective gear, decontamination protocols, and enough sanitizer to clean a small moon. What they got instead was a gentle, friendly dog who was just happy to meet new people. Rusty approached each crew member with the patience of a saint, allowing them to examine him, pet him, and slowly discover that touching another living being didn't actually cause immediate death. Ensign Nix actually laughed when Rusty licked his hand, apparently the first time anyone had heard him make a sound that wasn't regulation approved. The creature appears to enjoy social interaction, Quinn Vex observed, taking notes like she was documenting a new species. His name is Rusty, Jake reminded her. And yes, dogs are social animals. They're happiest when they're part of a pack. A pack? A family. A group that cares about each other. Vex looked around at her crewmates who were all gathered around watching Rusty with expressions of cautious wonder. We are a pack? You could be. That night, Jake found Captain Krill in his quarters, staring out the viewport at the stars. For the first time, the captain's uniform was slightly wrinkled, and his hands weren't perfectly clean. Officer Torres, Krill said without turning around, I believe I owe you an apology. For what? What? It's for not understanding the value of what we almost discarded. Jake joined him at the viewport. Rusty's not the only valuable thing you almost discarded, Captain. What do you mean? Your capacity to care about something other than efficiency. That's not contamination, that's what makes life worth living. Krill was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly Jake almost missed it, he said, I think I would like to learn how to be a pack leader. It's not about being a leader, Jake replied. It's about being a family. 6 months later, Jake Torres was having the surreal experience of being the only human aboard a Velaxian research vessel, and somehow, that was the least weird thing about his current situation. The Pristine Endeavor was still the cleanest ship in the galaxy, but it was also the happiest, which was causing some serious confusion at Velaxian High Command. Efficiency was up, morale was through the roof, and nobody could figure out why a crew that had previously been the emotional equivalent of furniture was suddenly acting like they enjoyed their jobs. The answer, of course, was currently sprawled across Captain Krill's lap during the morning briefing, getting his belly rubbed while the captain discussed plasma flow optimization. Rusty appears to have an intuitive understanding of antimatter containment procedures, Krill was saying with complete seriousness. His presence in engineering correlates with a 12% reduction in system failures. Jake had to hide his smile. Rusty's intuitive understanding mostly involved napping next to the warm engines and occasionally chasing maintenance drones, but if it made the crew happy and the ship run better, who was he to argue with the results? Quinn Vex had become Rusty's unofficial co-caretaker, which had transformed her from a walking rulebook into something approaching an actual person. She'd started smiling tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, and had even been caught talking to Rusty in baby talk, though she insisted she was optimizing communication protocols for improved interspecies understanding. Ensign Nix had appointed himself head of recreational activities, a position that hadn't existed before Rusty but was now considered essential for crew morale. His daily structured play sessions with the dog had evolved into something resembling actual fun, even if he still documented everything in triplicate. The real surprise was how naturally the Velaxians had taken to pack behavior once they understood what it meant. They'd developed elaborate schedules for feeding, walking, and playing with Rusty, treating pet care with the same meticulous attention they'd once reserved for equipment maintenance. It was simultaneously the most alien and most human thing Jake had ever seen. Jake, Pip's voice crackled through his comm, you need to see this. He found her in the ship's main corridor, staring at a wall display that showed the crew's psychological evaluation scores. The numbers were off the charts, literally. The Velaxian psychological assessment scale apparently hadn't been designed to measure actual happiness. High Command is demanding a full report, Pip said, grinning. They want to know what we did to make the crew so functional. What did you tell them? That we introduced a new biological efficiency enhancer. Jake laughed. Technically accurate. The best kind of accurate. They found Captain Krill in his ready room, carefully reading a book titled Advanced Canine Psychology and Pack Dynamics. Rusty was asleep on a custom-built bed that looked suspiciously like it had been engineered to exact specifications for optimal comfort. Captain, Jake said, I hear High Command wants to study your improved efficiency ratings. Krill looked up from his book, and Jake was struck by how much the alien had changed. There was warmth in his eyes now, humor in his expression. He still sanitized his hands regularly, but he'd also started carrying dog treats in his pockets. They are welcome to observe, Krill said, though I suspect they will find our methods unconventional. They think they'll understand? I think, Krill said, reaching down to scratch Rusty's ears, that understanding is not always required for implementation. Perhaps other ships could benefit from similar biological efficiency enhancers. Jake imagined a galaxy full of Velaxian ships, each with their own rescued dogs, their crews learning to laugh and play and care about something beyond duty and efficiency. It was a beautiful thought. You know, he said, I think you might be onto something. Rusty opened one eye, looked at the assembled humans and aliens who'd become his family, and wagged his tail. In his simple canine way, he understood something the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to learn. Sometimes the most important things in life can't be measured, calculated, or optimized. Sometimes they can only be loved. And sometimes that's exactly what the universe needs.